are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Recent IELTS Task 2 questions and answers. Hello there, my name is Ben Worthington, and in this tutorial we are going to answer IELTS Writing Task 2 questions seen by students recently who have taken the exam. Okay, so in the last couple of weeks, these questions were sent in by students who have been to the test centre and who have done the exam, and then they send in their questions to us. They're either our students or we collected them online, seen by other students. Now, once we get these questions, we add them to our course, and then this just increases the chances that you write an essay that you see in our course, and then you go and do the exam, and you've got the same essay question. How good would that be? Okay, and this has happened once or twice. Obviously, it doesn't happen every single time, but it's just one of those little things that we can do to help you pass. And we all know that if you want to be successful and you are struggling, then the accumulation of these little things, they add up. Right, let's jump into it straight away. So I'll read you the question, and if you want to get full benefit out of this tutorial, I suggest you pause and maybe brainstorm some ideas for yourself. If your brain goes blank, then that is an indication that you've got a problem and you need to start working on it. We have modules all about solving this issue about your brain going blank, but just bear that in mind. All right, so first one, although more and more people read news on the internet, newspapers will remain the most important source of news for the majority of people. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Right, one more time. And my step, and this is the step we teach in the course, and it just helps, especially in exam conditions, is to simplify it. Okay, so more people read news on the internet. However, newspapers will remain important for the majority of people. Agree or disagree? Right. These ones are tricky because we've kind of got two different opinions here. And then we're saying, do you agree or disagree with these two different opinions? And this is where a lot of task 2 frustration happens because, I'm saying, do you want peas or chips for dinner? Yes or no? And it's like, hey, that's not really a coherent question. So how do we solve this? What we teach in the course, and we've had lots of success with this, is just getting crystal clear our positions right at the beginning and then double and triple checking. So in this case, I'm going to say that I agree, more people are reading news on the internet because, and now I'm going to develop it, because it's more readily available, it's cheaper, it's more accessible, and often cases the algorithm of the social media sites give you information that you want to read. And I can go give an example about this. I don't know, I can talk about a study. I could talk about this tunnel syndrome where people get radicalized, but that's probably going a little bit off topic. So I'll just keep it to those factors, maybe give an example, but that's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the internet. I cannot ignore it. It's part of the question. Now, the next part of the question, which is probably going to be body paragraph 2, newspapers will remain the most important source of news for the majority of people. Now here, if I disagree with this, I'm going to be writing the same essay as I wrote in my body paragraph. Okay, I'm going to say it's not important because of the internet is cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And this is where we can really get ourselves in a bit of a mess. And I've seen essays like this where it's repeating the same arguments as before. The student probably is aware that they're repeating it, but they don't really know which direction to take. So in this case, I'm just going to agree that newspapers will remain an important source of news. Now, that's going to be my position. Now, the plan, what I will do is I'll probably start off with a conjunction somewhere at the beginning. I'll say, although the decline of newspapers has been well published, and although they are associated with an older generation, they are most definitely an incredible, important source of news. Okay, and then I'll talk about the neutrality of newspapers, which usually means that they're supposed to take kind of like a down the line approach. So they're not pro-left, they're not pro-right. In general, they're supposed to be neutral, which is a lot more than can be said about the social media sites. I'm going to say they're going to be neutral. I'm going to say the professional journalists. I'm going to talk about that, official government bodies only allow official newspapers and news outlets in, so this adds to the importance. And then I'll probably put a sentence about saying, however, unfortunately nowadays it's not the most important source for the majority of people. Okay, and that would probably be my body paragraph. And then to conclude, I'll give a summary of both, and I'll just make it short and sweet, and just most likely explicitly say that they are an incredibly important source. However, not for the majority of people, because newer generations barely purchase any form of news nowadays, which I think is true. I don't think I've bought a newspaper for over 10 or 15 years. I used to enjoy sitting down with a cup of tea in the Financial Times on a Sunday afternoon, but that doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, there you go. You've got a rough outline, and this is the approach that we take. And we've got whole modules about how to attack these questions, how to get ideas, how to develop these ideas, and how to organize your essay so you're not in this frustration spiral and contradicting your essay and just, crossing it out and writing it, rewriting it, because I've been there. This is how I was when I first started with IELTS Task 2. And it was incredibly embarrassing doing this and contradicting myself in the class. And this is what led me to IELTS Podcast, of interviewing experts who've been there. And also, just testing out what works, writing out over 100 Task 2 essays. And eventually it becomes simple and automatic, just like you heard. And that's exactly the technique we teach. Next question. An increasing number of developing countries are expanding their tourist industry. Why do you think it is the case? Point 1. Do you think it is positive or negative? Right. Quite simple, quite straightforward. We've got 2 questions. Body paragraph 1. Brainstorm ideas. Why are countries developing their tourist industry? Quite simple. Why are they doing this? Now, one technique that I teach in the course is just to bring the argument to money. Okay? And you can use the argument of money for a lot of different ones. I'll try and do it in the next question as well, just to demonstrate. But if you can, in this case, they are expanding their industry because of money. Obviously, I'm not going to say it so blunt, in such a blunt fashion, but they're expanding their industry because it's a source of income, it's a source of jobs, and often case it's relatively quick to develop, as opposed to bringing in factories and industrialization and industrializing. Now, that would be some beautiful topic-specific vocabulary to include in that paragraph. Now, body paragraph 2. Is this a positive or negative development? Now here, I'm just briefly going to mention both sides, but I will develop one. And I'm going to say that, well, actually, I'm going to use a get out of jail. I'm going to use the easy way. I'm going to say it depends. So that's going to kind of be my mini conclusion for that paragraph. I'm going to say it's positive because it can. I'm not saying it will. I'm going to say it can. I'll hedge the answer. Say it can develop jobs. It can bring about a small scale of industrialization with hotels. And also, it's a good way to preserve the culture of the region. Okay, now I'm going to say it's negative. And because I just don't want it to be ideas, I want to give some real life examples in there which make my argument stronger. I'm going to say that, however, there are some negative cases where the tourist industry has been overdeveloped. Barcelona, for example, has a serious problem because every summer cruise liners bring in thousands and thousands of tourists, and these push up prices for the locals, and they push up accommodation costs, and there's lots of negative consequences of becoming a tourist city. Okay? And then, just to finish off this paragraph, I will say, therefore, it largely depends on the scale and the necessity of the actual tourist industry. Okay? And from there, you can kind of like assume that, if it's a poor country, then the tourist industry is going to be very, very welcome. But if it's a city that's already kind of developed and can stand on its own legs, like Barcelona, it's quite prosperous alone without tourism, then it could be a hindrance. Okay, so I could probably include that in the conclusion. So there we go, quite straightforward. And you will notice the smart ones among you, which is probably the majority, you will notice I'm focusing mainly on my body paragraphs. And this is a technique we teach in the course. Why am I focusing mainly on the body paragraphs? Well, because this is where the majority of the points are. 2, after I've got my body paragraphs clear, I can go back to my introduction and I can go and then I can just brainstorm some ideas for the conclusion. But I need to get off to the right track. I need to start off correctly. Otherwise, I'm going to be losing points for task response and whatnot. Third question. Nowadays, more and more people from different cities are spending more time away from their families. What are the possible reasons and the effects on the people themselves and their families? Quite straightforward. Now, I would be silly not to mention COVID here. I think it's kind of obvious that the examiner who wrote this question is aiming for some kind of answer about COVID, about remote work. Okay. Maybe not remote work. So let's see. Nowadays, more and more people from different cities are spending more time away from their families. Okay, people from different cities are spending more time away from their families. Okay, what are the possible reasons and the effects of the people themselves and their family? So again, I'm going to give you the example that I said before. Money, as they say in, SpongeBob SquarePants? With Krusty Krab. And his answer to a lot of things is just money. Anyway, what are the possible effects on the people themselves and their family? Okay, so the possible reasons are that people can make more money in larger cities. Okay. So I could develop the whole body paragraph 1 about the possible reasons. Okay, and then develop it. For example, this trend is called urbanization, and it is especially prevalent among developing countries, whereby oftentimes young adults leave their agricultural families and go to work in the cities where they can get higher incomes and start saving, and usually send the money back home to help their poor family members. Okay? Something like that, the possible reasons, and just develop it and give a specific example. Maybe I will talk about China, about the migration. Maybe I will talk about, I was going to say about what happened in England when it was industrialization, but that would have been wrong because at the beginning of the question we've got nowadays. So I don't want to go off topic. And in the end, I'm not going to mention COVID because that is, maybe I could mention COVID. I could say another possible reason could be pandemics, whereby cities are in lockdown, and travel becomes even more difficult. So that would be another valid reason, but I just wanted to give you the example of money. Now, that's the first half of the question answered in body paragraph 1. Notice I've just focused the entire body paragraph on the first part of that question. Now, I've got a clear paragraph and I've got the whole of body paragraph 2 to talk about the effects on the people themselves and the effects on their families. Now, personally, I've lived away from my family back in England for over 20 years. So I can talk about this. Am I going to say, when I left home at aged 18 for the first time and lived in Australia for 1 year, I felt incredibly lonely? No, because that's not really an academic essay. It's not really an academic argument. It's just my personal experience. So I'm going to try and generalize it. I'm going to say, oftentimes when adults, especially young adults, such as teenagers, leave their families, they can often develop a sense of loneliness, but usually a stronger degree of independence, which can be quite strengthening and empowering for the person. However, for the parents, it is often said, I'm going to hedge it, I'm not going to say often the parents feel lonely, I'm going to say often, it is often said that the parents feel lonely. However, they could feel a sense of pride as their offspring set about making a mark in the world on their own. Okay, just looking at it in a positive way. I could talk about loneliness, I could talk about depression, I could talk about independence. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, this is not an intelligence test. I can put down any answer just as long as it is correctly written and obviously relevant. I can't talk about, it would be silly to talk about the effect on families is that now they have less food in the fridge. That's just ridiculous, If I did talk about the families possibly becoming depressed, possibly becoming proud, it doesn't really matter. I've just got to take one direction, explain it, communicate it. This is the language exam. IELTS, the International English Language Testing System. And I've developed it. All right? I've communicated it effectively and I've answered the question. So there we go. We've got body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, very neatly organized. And now from those body paragraphs, it's quite straightforward to build an introduction and a conclusion. That's it from me today. We're going to be doing more of these recent questions and we're going to be doing more of the university talks as well. So there's lots of new podcasts coming out soon. Daphne will be back as well, possibly in a month's time, maybe a bit longer. But don't worry, she's definitely coming back. And you'll hear more podcasts from me, possibly from Ellen, and more interviews with universities. And also just remember, if you are struggling with IELTS, then you can go to IELTSpodcast.com, sign up for some free IELTS materials where you can get some discounts, sample essays, vocabulary lists. However, if you're in a bit of a rush and you need to pass soon and you're stuck at 6.5 and you're completely fed up, then I strongly recommend to join our course. We're getting some great results, as you'll probably hear from the students, from the success stories we are publishing every single month. Come and join us. We'd love to have you on the course. We'd love to see you improve. Have a great day and good luck with your IELTS exam.
Thanks for listening to IELTSpodcast.com.